You guys are the big shots, so. Do I need to look good? Are you taping me?
Yeah. we'll make sure we put some bunny ears over yours.
So what's important to you? What do you want to ask me?
I'd like to start something relevant to you as Governor of New Mexico, which is, given the fact that David Iglesias was one of the U.S. attorneys fired and that Wilson and Domenici were directly involved, what do you think should happen to them? Should they be censured? Should they resign? And should Gonzalez be impeached if he does not resign or be fired?
Well, I think Gonzalez should be fired, and I call for his resignation. I wanted to give him a chance to explain himself before the Judiciary Committee, but I felt it was totally, unwarranted what he did. And what I was looking for was for him to say, I will not politicize the Justice Department, that I'm a lawyer for the people rather than the political advisor of the President and the White House staff. Secondly, I wanted him to say that in the future, U.S. attorneys should be confirmed by the Senate. Third, that he would not take instructions on political issues before the White House staff. And then fourth, that at least he'd be honest and say, I knew what was happening. Now, Domenici and Wilson, there has to be some ethics investigations, and that's going on. I think both of them are going to face tough opposition because of this issue. It's resonating in New Mexico. So I believe Gonzalez should resign. I think the Attorney General should not be a political crony of the President in the future. I believe there should be somebody who has law enforcement experience, but also somebody that has civil liberties background. And it should be, I would probably appoint a distinguished judge or somebody that's impartial, that is not a political crony.
Great. Kind of segueing into my question with the competitive nature of those, seats. As the, only Western candidate, what do you see as the potential and opportunities for Democrats in the West? And what's successful? How do you manage to be successful as a Democrat in the West?
Well, the West is clearly veering Democratic. If you look at 4 years ago, the governors from Canada to Mexico, 7 out of 7 were Republican. Today, 5 out of 7 are Democrat. Now, what I believe is happening is the following issues that affect and help all Democrats, and then I'll focus on governors and myself. What has helped make that trend? I won't say permanent, but very much move in our direction. The rise of environmentalism, renewable energy, the rise and the ire, rather, of traditional supporters of the Democratic Party that might be sportsmen, that might be recreationists, that are totally turned off by the Bush energy policies. In other words, drill at all costs. Little regard for any kind of environmental protection, clean air, roadless areas, so that's one. Second has been a very strong Hispanic migration into those states. Even in a smaller scale like Utah, but if you take Arizona, if you take Colorado, take Nevada, you take a lot of those states, that has been another important issue. Third, I'm the only presidential candidate with a transportation smart growth policy. In this country, what's happening is a lot of folks from California, Los Angeles, San Diego, are moving out west to escape the traffic. And then you've got the Northeast and Midwest doing the same. And what that's causing in the West is a new set of voters that believe very strongly that issues like quality of life, lifestyle, are very important. And that is favoring us, but that's causing Westerners to also assess what, in Las Vegas, the biggest issue is traffic. In Los Angeles, I don't have to tell you here. And I think we have to start looking at a lot of Western governors are doing that, looking at issues like light rail, looking at issues, energy efficient mass transit systems. The president, every year or so, gets billions of dollars to build new highways. We got to start thinking beyond that, not just smart growth, strong land use policy. And it's affecting the West as sort of the receptacle of many of these issues that involve smart growth. In terms of other issues where, you know, individualism issues, issues relating to, you know, the West is very, you're not going to tell us what to do. And that's where I think there's some very strong anti-government initiatives that do well. Like, the West is very pro-choice. The West is, at the same time it's pro-choice, it's you know, pro-West Second Amendment. At the same time that, and I can't underemphasize the energy side. If you see the most progressive policies in this country on renewable energy, on what states are doing in terms of renewable portfolio standards, like we've gone in New Mexico to 20% by 2020, has to be solar, wind, biomass by traditionals by 2020. In California, what it's done in climate change, what we in the West, in New Mexico have done, we have the strongest targets by 75% reduction in greenhouse emissions by 2050. And we basically said by 2030 in New Mexico, we're going to abide by the Kyoto Treaty. We're the only state that abides by the Kyoto Treaty. So what that is doing is, and then you have governors that are progressive governors that, you know, deal with issues relating to immigration. I'm a economic growth Democrat. I've cut taxes. You know, I believe the way you revitalize this economy is partially through the tax code. You give a company or private sector funds to, or a tax cut to, if they pay over a prevailing wage, we'll give them a tax cut if they pay higher wages. So you give tax incentives to those entities that create jobs. You know, I think we should be the party of science and stem cell research and R&D and high tech. And we should be, you know, we in New Mexico, if you're a technology startup, we won't charge you any taxes for 3 years. I would do that on a national basis. I think if anything, and this is also a Western answer, we too much have been stuck in the politics of redistribution instead of the politics of economic growth. And that typifies a lot of the approach of the governors in the West that are creating jobs and balancing budgets. So that's my Western spiel. And my point is that as a presidential candidate, I could bring several Western states to the Democratic column. I can bring, I believe, Colorado and Arizona, Nevada, and be competitive in states like Utah, Montana. You know, the parties ignored the West in the past. And that's extra real estate that I could bring as a presidential candidate that we don't have now. I mean, right now we have candidates that may be very strong in California and the Northeast. And so you build your coalition around 20 states, and we don't have a national strategy to appeal in some states in the South, appeal in the Midwest, Ohio, but certainly the Southwest that's been ignored.
Okay. I want to pick up a little bit on what you were saying about being an economic growth Democrat and those things. You know, we had a PPIC poll out here in California that I think it showed at least 65 or maybe 70% of the people surveyed said they would pay higher taxes if it meant they could get quality health care for everyone in the state. And I just want to know how you respond to people, you know, liberal Democrats who think that the ideas and sort of the rhetoric about taxation needs to change, about how, you know, America maybe is worth paying for, and that taxes are the price you pay for a free society. And instead of this rhetoric around taxation that the Republicans have been very successful in putting into the sort of the mainstream over the last 25, 30 years, the whole great tax revolt that we've had certainly here in California since '78 and Prop 13. how do you respond to that?
I think that kind of thinking has gotten us in trouble. I'm being very honest.
Mhm.
I believe that I would replace the Bush tax cuts with tax cuts for the middle class and to reward companies that create more jobs. In other words, you know, there's the higher level, there should be equity in our tax system. But I believe in tax cuts for the country to become green, tax incentives. And I'm for an Apollo program of public and private investment, yes, spending, and tax cuts to become green. And that's an Apollo program to reduce our dependence on foreign oils. I don't mind if solar energy companies make a little money and they create jobs and, you know, and retro. I think there's a huge job market for America, and especially in California, for high-wage jobs and creating renewable energy companies and retrofitting homes. You know, and I would ask every American on my energy plan to sacrifice. In other words, do something about being more efficient with light bulbs and heating and air conditioning and washing machines. And I'd have a fuel-efficient vehicle. I'd double the fuel efficiency in 10 years. I would, climate change, I've got the strongest policy. I think we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 by 90%. I think they gotta be aggressive mandates, not goals. You know, beware the politician that tells you, this is my goal. Well, you know, I'd have a mandate. I'd have a cap and trade system that says, this is the cap, and this is how you achieve it. So, no, on healthcare, I believe that you can have a national healthcare plan. I'm for a universal plan. And I believe it can be financed by dealing with the existing inefficiencies in the system. I really do. By 31% of all our healthcare costs goes into bureaucracy, goes into administration, goes into the fact that there are no electronic records. I mean, this is something you guys should look at more, that we have health information systems that are totally inadequate, that patients and doctors can't, you know, share in records of people that have problems. Then I do existing reforms, like allow every American to purchase a, you know, congressional health care plan. Medicare is done by the feds, Medicaid by the states. I would have Medicare, I'd allow those 55 and over to purchase it. I know this is, you know, you guys don't care about.
Of course we do. We have parents.
We want to get to,
No, I know you care. My only point is, look, the first way I would pay for a national health care plan is existing inefficiencies, the 31%. We spend $2 trillion on health care. We're already paying for the uninsured in emergency rooms. You know, secondly, the war in Iraq. You're spending $400 billion there. I'd shift some of those to health care. I mean, those that tell you, oh, you can't do it because they're fungible. Well, you can do it. I would also have what Massachusetts and California are starting to do, and that is everybody pays their fair share on health care. The employer, the employee, the state, the federal government. And those that can't, you give them a little break. You give them a little subsidy. Those, you know, some poor guy that works at this convention center, you know, you give them a little incentive, not a tax cut, you give them a little subsidy. Mm-hmm. And you hold down insurance costs. So it's more personal responsibility, you know, rather than, if all we said was we're gonna tax the rich to pay for everything, I mean, pretty soon you're gonna start hitting the middle class, which already is hit.
A&T. Would you repeal the A&T or fix it?
The
alternative minimum tax?
Yeah,
Affecting
I would
the
fix
middle
it.
class.
I mean, the middle class is really, right now, the rate of inflation has made the middle class very vulnerable in the next few years. Absolutely, I would fix it.
Recent polling shows that about 49% of Californians feel like they're falling behind, and only 15% think they're actually getting ahead. What would you do as president to address them?
You mean talk about economically?
Economically.
Well, you know, I just believe we gotta have policies that, you know, I was on an airplane the other day. By the way, I'm for a passenger bill of rights after my constant rides on commercial airlines. They don't tell you anything, you're late, you're stuck there. We gotta talk about issues like that, just like a transportation policy. And so I'm sitting with this woman, and she says to me, you know, I'm a researcher, socials, and I am middle class, and I feel I'm paying for the poor and the rich. That's what she said. So obviously tax equity, tax fairness, but also I would use the tax code to reward those companies and people that are producing jobs or going to school. I would, in California, obviously you have to start with increasing the minimum wage, which you have done, right?
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
that the law now?
Yeah, it was passed in the last legislative session.
But has it been implemented?
Yeah,
It's
they-
gradual.
The first part of it,
One-
yes.
Gradual.
$1 this year and one.
And $1 the following.
You know, I would start, I would focus on California's strengths. I mean, your strengths are biotechnology. I would look at your tax structure. You know, we're taking a lot of your people because your state income tax and your business taxes are a bit uncompetitive. I would find ways, again, to reward companies that hire over the prevailing wage. I would, obviously, a national health care plan would help with health care coverage, which is a huge strain with the middle class. You have a lot of aerospace, you have a lot of people that have pension problems because of the nature of your economy. I think there's gotta be more pension protection. You've got a lot of people here that, look, the key to everything is education in my job. Train our workers better, find ways to give students a national scholarship plan, not just to go to college, but community college, vocational training. And then you're gonna ask me, and I hope you do, how do you pay for this? How do you pay for all this? Well, this is how I would. I would have a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Obviously not in time of war or recession, but, you know, have a plan, 10 years. This has been proposed before. I voted for one in Congress. I have to do it as a governor. I gotta run a state. I've run a state. I've run a bureaucracy of 110,000 in energy. I'd have a line item veto allowing the president to veto pork projects. I would eliminate earmarks, which are not gonna be popular with the Congress, but there's billions of dollars. I would deal with corporate welfare. Eliminate the tax breaks for companies that take jobs overseas. I would also have what is called pay-as-you-go policies. This is what we did in the Clinton administration, which allowed us, by the way, to have a surplus, and we balance a budget. Pay-as-you-go means you start any new program, you cut any taxes, in the same budget, you you pay for it. I would restructure, as I said, the Bush tax cuts to focus on those that produce jobs. I would also reorder priorities. I mean, you gotta look at, my priorities are human. They're human needs. They're education. They're healthcare. They're training people. They're environmental protection. But I'm an economic growth Democrat. My every solution is not to tax the rich. My every solution is to use, is to motivate business, build coalitions, bring churches and communities and like I've done in New Mexico, together to improve schools. Education would be huge for me. I'd start at preschool. I'd have full-day kindergarten. I'd extend the school day. I'd extend the school year. I'd pay our teachers better. I'd have a minimum wage for teachers, but with accountability. I'd have a goal of 15 years. Today, what are we, 28th, 29th, science and math, high school? Mm-hmm. I would go to 15 years, we should be number one. We have a crash program, and that's gonna take R&D. That's gonna take investing in science. It's going to take investing in people. What do you?
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Well, I want to be sure that.
In terms of taxes, you know, a big theme, at least at this convention, has been Congresswoman Zolofgren has found $50 billion that the federal government owes us, and we're getting about 75 cents per dollar that we send the federal
California?
government back. California, yes. And so the question is, as a presidential candidate, what would you do about that?
Well, but those are, those are federal resources. That's federal spending, right? Yeah, you guys, California is the same on Homeland Security, proportionally funds, as Wyoming. I mean, you got to do it on the basis of need. And I do support more fairness in terms of, you're a state that, you're the 7th largest economy in the world, but you're treated, when it comes to funding on transportation and when it comes to environmental protection, you're not treated with what I believe is equity. So I would find ways to, is it 50 billion where you feel you're under?
Well, 50 billion was what Congresswoman Zolofgren says that we're actually owed, and then aside from that, we also have the tax disparity in terms of redistributed resources federally. So I mean that's on top of it.
Yeah, I would look at, I certainly would look at Homeland Security. I mean, you guys are more at risk. Your ports, you think our ports are safe? You think our cargo in the ports are safe? And you gotta do it with a plan. You can't just do it with redistributing money. But yeah, I've always felt that there's gotta be more equity in the dispersal of all the federal resources. I don't know quite how she would do it. It's because I don't have the information. Would she do it on the basis of population?
I mean, the argument is essentially just that California obviously has some of the largest infrastructural challenges of any state in the nation, and on top of it, we have this, we're essentially subsidizing a lot of other states' infrastructure.
Well, because of your, and your infrastructure is inadequate.
Yeah.
Your highways need to be expanded. You need to have light rail. You need to, we need to think of new ways that we live and work, at the workplace. I think you guys and the technology experts, can contribute to this.
We gotta move, guys.
Well, I want to make sure.
Yeah,
What was yours?
Yeah, just briefly, do you support Congress's approach to the Iraq supplemental, and what do you think they should do once the veto happens, assuming it does?
What they should do once the veto happens is to construct legislation to deauthorize the war. I believe if we continue on these funding issues, we're going to lose. We don't have the numbers. And in some cases, the political will. We had a vote to authorize the war, and I was in Congress 15 years, so I know what I'm talking about. We had a vote to authorize the war. We should have a vote to deauthorize the war. And there you have the benchmarks. The president can't veto that, but what he will do is he would challenge it on the War Powers Act.
Right.
And then it goes to the Supreme Court. I think you gotta go for broke. I think that's the way to do it. I would have,
Even if it puts the party's political future in danger in 2008, go for broke. Maybe
Absolutely.
This is the right.
I don't think it puts us in danger because people want us out of the war. My plan is the clearest. You got all these, on the one hand, if I'm president, I'd get out this calendar year, but I would do it with diplomacy. And I have a record there. I've been in the Middle East. I was UN ambassador. I went face to face with Saddam Hussein. I was just in North Korea. I got something done there 3 weeks ago. We got American remains back. We're pushing them to dismantle their nuclear weapons. You got to have a dialogue. So, but my position is different from the other. I want no residual troops. I want us out this calendar year. I would redeploy some of those forces to deal with international terrorism in the region, in Bahrain and Kuwait, certainly in Afghanistan. But the majority of the funds would go to domestic needs. But, there is a terrorist threat. I do believe there is one. But I'm not, on the one hand, on the other hand, I'm going to keep 50,000. I mean, we got 140,000 there. You get 50,000 residual troops, you might as well keep them.
And that includes contractors, you want them
Out. It's $400, $500 billion. that we spent, I bet you a third is wasted. Contractors, no-bid contractors, the Halliburtons building swimming pools for the Iraqi Revolutionary Guard that are not filled with water. So I guess that's why nobody's been swimming, but. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor.
Thanks for your time.
I appreciate it.
All right. And I'm not for, by the way, taxing the internet. I think that's gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
You know, the telecoms. the
What about,
tele-
what about net neutrality?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. You shouldn't be taxed. This is a free form of expression. The last thing you should become is part of the telecom bureaucracy. They'll swallow you up, you'll lose.
Mhm.
You know, you'll be part of the telecom coalition, you'll lose. I think your strength is your independence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya. Thanks for your time, fellas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my dad's a happy constituent.
Where is he?
Up good.
Oh, good.
One of those people moving in.
Yeah.
I want to go down for sure.